This video is sponsored by Grimoire, a triad of books that's recently been expanded by their monster Grimoire, which is currently live on Kickstarter. It's full of 400 new monsters for grimdark campaigns, it features 10 new maps to explore combat on, 5 boxes of cards featuring each monster in packs of 80, a bunch of paintable minis, large variants, and 2 absolutely gigantic miniatures that'll cover half the board. I wouldn't even call these things miniatures. In addition to this insane number of monsters, they also have guides on how to handle combat and what kind of things can be harvested from these monsters. The higher tiers in the add-ons also feature this interesting trinket collection, which seems to be a bit in early development, but Ghostfire has yet to skimp on quality in anything so far, and I'm really excited for them. Go check out the campaign and support the team if you're able, then enjoy the video. Well, you guys liked the idea and I had fun with it, so let's do round 2. In this little series that's mostly paired with Grim Hollow, I'll be looking at various cryptids, reinterpreting them, and designing tabletop encounters so that people can use them to kill their friends. So let's look at the Wendigo. Coming from Algonquian-speaking cultures around the Great Lakes, this Native American demon is something that I would consider a real possibility, but one that got lost in translation. The word Wendigo describes someone who has an intense craving for cannibalizing human flesh, a craving that is so spiritually strong that it enables them to overpower and slaughter people in a supernatural way. These cannibals suffer a lot of health issues, their minds go into a psychosis, and their bodies become deformed by their living conditions. You know the common Wendigo design, how it's this giant monster with a deer head and gigantic antlers? That's just a deer pelt with the skull intact. So in other words, Wendigos were real. But looking into the supernatural angle of things, the only magic that I think we get to play with when making this encounter is brute strength, spindly agility, and something horrific that I only recently learned. Every person that a Wendigo eats adds to their mass in equal proportion, which sort of explains why they're always hungry. They never poop, they just grow. There's a certain One Piece spoiler that comes to mind when thinking about a giant Wendigo. There's an anecdotal story about a giant Wendigo whose legs were cut off, and when they revisited the body, they found it still alive, eating the marrow from its own bones. So no wonder that it can grow and eat constant fat but still be gaunt. The explanation is that it stores energy inside of these bones. And one little note before we get started on the monster design, there is an illness called Wendigo psychosis, where people get all the basic symptoms of rage and flesh craving, but they also get hypochondria and they're afraid that they have some extra undiagnosed illness. But to me, that's just a Wendigo who's familiar with big pharma propaganda. So step 1. How does someone become a Wendigo? The first thing that they'll probably have to deal with is prolonged starvation. The second thing, let's say they have to develop a literal lunacy just before they should die. So because they existed in a lake area, let's say that becoming a Wendigo, you have to stare at a full moon's reflection in a lake bed for an entire night, never becoming distracted. That's actually the origin of the word lunatic. And the third thing that a person would have to do in order to become a Wendigo is, obviously, to eat someone as a part of an hour-long transmutation ritual that maybe isn't even intentional. And let's say that for the most part, these people will need the pelt of a horned beast. So instead of fattening or warming up, you just grow. Your head melds with this pelt that you're wearing, and you become the supernatural Wendigo. Now the real problem here is a lack of size capping. Wendigos can Wendigrow to the size of the Eiffel Tower if they munch on enough man-flesh. So let's make our Wendigo for this encounter the size of a frost giant, so close to 20 feet tall. This situation would best play out in a winter area or in the woods, likely just before sunset or just after sunrise. In either case, the party is tired and they're dealing with camp. It's important to note that this thing is supernaturally skinny, so even if it does have crazy dense bones, it's still light as a feather. No footprints, no earthy rumble, just silent horror. It's a cryptid after all. If it didn't have stealth, it wouldn't even be a cryptid. These Wendigos are sinister ex-humans, so this encounter begins with it trying to imitate the voice of someone injured, like the Baron Annihilation, except this guy actually used to speak the language. If a party member goes off alone to investigate, or they split up in general, everyone is now in a very bad place. Let's say that a 20-foot tall Wendigo has the mass of 12 people and strength to match. Because challenge rating makes as much sense as a child factory worker, let's just make this thing challenge rating 12. Round 1. The party is hopefully split up, or at the very least ambushed. The first surprise attack is a massive rending slash made with bony fingers and the intent of grabbing a fistful of meat right off the bone. We're working in early or late daylight here, so the presence of a 20-foot tall starving person covered in ice, mold, and blood is what I would call frightening, and that's worthy of a saving throw. Now that combat has started, this one is going to go a little bit simply. Its powers are cumulative, its brain is enraptured by little more than hunger, and its target is going to literally be the fattest party member. To the Wendigo, high constitution is attractive, which means that I probably have to give it a very high hit point cap. It survives on the frost after all, so it can endure a lot. I think that the horror of this encounter could lie in any party member that drops to 0 hit points. Let's make this really mean, and give the Wendigo a reactive ability to almost instantly rip off a morsel when someone falls. So death comes swift by the Wendigo. And eating does make it stronger, so let's say if it manages to eat an entire party member over the course of 3 rounds, it gains a new hit die, a damage die, and 1d4 feet in height. Now the question is, how do you kill it? Well, that's easy, you have a barbarian in the party. Okay, that's it, thanks for watching. Honestly, that is the only recorded way to beat one. Just pummel it back with raw force, and then chop up the skin connecting these crazy powerful bones. I'll add that as a minor note, although it doesn't fit directly into D&D stats, nothing but the Wendigo itself can break its bones. So to nod to this concept that I've made, I have tacked on resistance to bludgeoning damage. Enjoy giving your party nightmares with something that's partly from myth and partly from history. Thanks for watching.